Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bay Area Content Marketing Meetup. Today, we are finding the stories you didn't know you had. We're here with Chad Illa-Petersen, the story catcher. And Chad's going to dive into a technique called recognize, relate, and remember to help you discover and journal stories that resonate with your audience, craft experiences into compelling narratives using another method called hero fertile harvest, and turn engagement into conversion by aligning your story with the customer's journey. You're going to leave equipped with tools to build a storytelling arsenal, connect deeply with your clients, and convert shared moments into customer action. Chad is at a Dunkin' location right now and in Texas. Chad, thanks for joining us and take it away.
Awesome. Glad to be here. This session is not sponsored by Duncan, but if you are listening, Duncan, I'm interested in talking. Thanks so much for having me here, guys. I kind of back and forth debating on whether or not I want to do the whole share screen and do the slides thing versus just sharing the information and letting you just grab that pen and paper or whatever it is you use to take notes so that we're just more paying attention to that than whatever fancy schmancy thing is on the screen. So for right now, I'm not going to do that. Dennis mentioned up front that what I do is a little bit different than perhaps what you've heard in the past or what maybe you thought this was going to be about. Obviously, there's a lot of people who teach storytelling, and everyone has their own different version or different component of storytelling that they like to share. Some about crafting a really short message, some are about different things. But I did some research and I found that 85% of the people I spoke to that are speakers or business owners, marketers, sales team leaders, they said that the thing they struggled the most with was finding the stories to share. Sure, there's people who, after they have them, they need to learn how to craft them and the best way to use them. But the number one problem they actually had was finding the stories. Years ago, I had friends who told me, Chad, you're really good at getting people to open up, to share more of themselves. You're good at pulling stories out of people. And it was from that the story catcher kind of became what it is. I love hearing other people's stories. And I love when someone's light goes on and they realize that they have permission to share stories that they didn't think maybe they should, or that they didn't think were relevant to what they do. When they realize, wow, that actually is worth sharing. There's value in this story. When I was a kid in high school, my junior year, I was the mascot. And I got to be mascot because I had a lot of weird talents. One of those was that I could juggle and I could ride unicycles. My junior year of high school, though, I felt like I really needed to step up my coolness factor. And so I got a 6-foot unicycle and decided after learning how to ride it that I was going to see if I could ride it all the way to my high school because, as you know, nothing says, hey, ladies, like a guy on top of a 6-foot unicycle. There were a few problems with my plan. First was I was going to have to cross a 6-lane road, very high traffic. The other two were while on my little unicycle, I could jump on it and ride. The 6-foot required you to climb up it in order to get on it. I had a little bit of a fear of, not heights, but a fear of falling. So I only learned how to get on it with a ladder or a truck. I couldn't climb up it to mount it. So if I fall, I'm done. So I can't fall. The other thing I never learned to do on the 6-foot was a thing called rocking. And that's where the unicycle wheels kind of going back and forth a little bit to help you stay in one place. Because if the wheel stops moving, then the seat does. Something's always moving on the unicycle, preferably the wheel. So I can't stop. So those are my only problems. I can't stop and I can't fall. Other than that, no problem. They came. I made it all the way to this intersection. I knew I would. And I was holding on to a stop sign, the very top of the stop sign, waiting for my moment. The cars kept going and going. Finally, the seas parted, if you will. And I pedaled with all of my might to cross this 6-lane road, not realizing that the unicycle had kind of gotten stuck in this little divot. And so when I pedaled, the wheel didn't move. And I mentioned earlier, if the wheel doesn't move, then the other part does. And that other part was the seat with me sitting on it 6 feet high in the air. So I came crashing down unexpectedly. I broke both my hands, blood gushing down my knees, and I had to begin the long walk home. On the way back, this older gentleman was working in his front yard and he yelled out at me, "Hey, you're pretty good on that thing." At first, I thought, "Well, that's like really mean uh, for him to do that." But then I realized he never saw me fall. He only saw me when I was riding in all my glory. And he couldn't see how I was now because his yard was so big. I realized then that I always strive so hard to be the best at what I did. We all do it. But in that moment, I realized I didn't have to be the best. I just had to be memorable. And the thing that makes you the most memorable are the stories that you have, your stories. And we'll go into other people's stories here in a minute. There's a TV show called Vikings. Some of you may have watched it. And there was this old Viking elder telling stories of the past and whatnot. And then this young, I don't know, Gen Z Viking came up to him and was like, "Yo, bro," or "No cap, we need new tea," or I don't know what the lingo is, right? But he said, "We're tired of your stories, old man." And the guy looked at him, and I love the line he said. He said, "Stories are all we have. Stories are all we have. We're made up of stories." People always like to say, "Hey, what's your brand story? What's your story?" And the truth is, there is not a story. All of our stories are the culmination of other stories. Who we are is all the stories that have made us who we are. Our business is all the stories that have made our business who it is. The same with our customers. Their stories, there's countless stories that have made them who they are and took them to the point where they decided they wanted to do business with you. Employees, why they like working with you, how they came to come work with you. It's not just one story. What's cool about stories that I found through experience, and you've all experienced it, but all through studying and seeing some of the scientific research, is that when we share stories, they open up a portal of belonging. When we ask other people their stories, they feel like they're a part of something. You may have heard the scientific research that says when you're telling a story and there's an emotion involved in it, and you're delivering the story the right way, that the people who are listening feel the same things you're feeling. So when you're sad, they're sad. When you're happy, they're feeling happy. When it's like when you go to a movie and there's this tense moment of fear and anxiety that the people on the screen are feeling, you feel it too. You tense up, and stories have that same ability. So if we find the right stories and we share the right stories, then we're able to connect with people in a way that we wouldn't normally connect with just the normal things we tend to share in our marketing, which is usually very surface and fact-based. I'm not saying get rid of the facts. I'm saying what we're going to learn is how to deliver those facts using a story so that I connect to it more deeply. I've had people who've done this and have asked their customers, like, "Why have you decided to do business with us?" And a lot of times it's like, "I don't know. I just really like you guys. I trust you guys." And it's because they've connected with them. So as we go through this, I want you to kind of change the way you think a little bit about marketing. You ever have those moments in the middle of the night where you wake up and you write down this idea that just popped in your head? And then normally, if you're me, I get up the next morning, I read it, and I have no idea what I wrote down or what the heck it was about. It made lots of sense in the middle of the night, but in the morning, it's just ridiculous. Well, I had one moment where I did this, and the next morning, it stuck, and I really liked what popped in my head. And that was the thought that maybe they're not in our funnels, but we're in their funnel. And the goal with stories and connecting with people is not to force someone down a path or a journey we want them to take, but for them to feel so connected with us that they reach out, grab our hands, and say, "Please come with me on my journey." That's what we want to do. We want to be invited to go on the journey with them, not create stuff that forces them to go where we want them to go. And so what we do is we start catching these stories. And what I love to teach people in workshops and things that I do is how to create what I call a story-centric marketing plan. And in order to do that, you have to continually catch stories so that you can build what I call your story catching arsenal. It's this place where you can pull stories from when you need them, based on who people are, where they are in their journey, what emotions you want to evoke, and what, conversion you want to get out of it. But to do that, you have to start catching them. So my framework has 3 parts: catch the story, craft the story, and convert with the story. The first thing we have to do, of course, is catch them. In order to catch stories, there's 3 things I like to emphasize, and that's learning how to recognize stories when they happen, remember forgotten stories, and then a word, I don't know, I made it up. I call it correlate. It's a combination of relate and create. So we want stories that are relatable, but we also want to create stories that build relationships. Meaning we want to catch our stories. We want to, your own stories, right? Catch my story, catch their story, catch our story. And that's the word correlate that they came up with. I don't know, works for me. So remembering stories can be a little tough. And we have some little tips and tricks and things that if we have time, maybe we'll do one. If not, I'll give you some ideas on how to do some of these exercises on your own. But I want to start with recognize. As I did the research and I found that so many people said, you know what? We struggle with finding stories. I also found out that people didn't realize that stories were happening. They didn't think they were interesting. My life is just blah, 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 blah. And the truth is, that's not true. We just don't see it because to us, it's just regular life. But I guarantee if I spend a day shadowing you, I would find moments throughout your regular day that intrigued me, that made me curious, and made me want to ask questions. And you would start telling me stories, and most of them would be things that you didn't realize were stories or things that you had forgotten. If you were to take, and maybe do this later, because I know we don't only have so much time. If you were to take your morning routine, what it is you do every morning, and sit through it and try to find stories behind why you do the things you do. Why do you get up at a certain time? Why is there a certain cereal that you really like? Why do you eat what you eat? Why do you brush your teeth the way you brush your teeth? Why do you use the toothpaste that you use? Why do you drink or not drink coffee? If you do drink coffee, why do you drink it the way that you do? I challenge you, as this is one of your little tasks from today, is to go through your morning routine and find places where you can find stories. And then hopefully you've connected with me and share them with me. I'd love to hear them. I did this with a couple, I do this in workshops. I remember one lady, she talked about coffee and she was a big coffee drinker. Cream, sugar, just flavoring. And then she went overseas. She was in the military, and where she was, she couldn't get anything but black coffee. So she learned to drink black coffee. And then she learned to like black coffee. And when she came back home, she never went back to drinking regular coffee. Now, if I just told you, oh, I take my coffee black, that's great. But if I said, let me explain, let me tell you how I started drinking it black. And I start telling you about my time serving the country, the military, what was going on over there, and how in those moments where I just needed that extra burst of energy, the only coffee I could get was black. You can start to connect a little bit more. There's emotion in the story. There's patriotism. There's self-sacrifice. There's all of these little pieces. And it's just about drinking coffee. Another woman one time told me, she's, yeah, you know what? Every morning, I never thought about it, but I take the hottest shower I can possibly take. I said, okay. He said, well, years ago, I went and did mission work in Africa. And I was there for a year. And where I was, there was no hot water. All the showers, everything we did was just cold. It was cold water. And when I came back, I remember the first time I finally got to have a hot shower again. And I was so grateful for that moment that I turned it on as hot as I could. And now I do it every day. And it's part of her gratitude in the morning. She takes it as hot as she can. And it's because of that experience. So I want you to think through, and yours don't have to be like that over the top, like that, but I want you to think through those. The reason I want you to do this, because the goal with recognizing stories is changing your whole mindset of the way you see things. It's about being curious. It's about, like, I'm at Dunkin' right now, right? And they've got balloons over there. What? I don't know why. Why are there balloons there? Why did they decide the balloons are going to be there? Why do they have the store set up this way? Why did they choose this kind of lighting? What was the story behind the decisions that they made? There's stories everywhere. So it's a story catching mindset. It's a different way of thinking. When it comes to remembering stories, there's lots of tools and tricks, techniques that you can do. One is story prompts. And all of you AI people, AI is great for story prompts. You go into Chat GPT or whatever it is you use and say, hey, give me a list of story prompts to help me think about possible stories that happened to me during work. And it will give you words. It'll give you some questions. It'll give you just words to think about. You ever been in a conversation with someone and all of a sudden you remember this story you haven't thought about it in years? You're like, oh, let me tell you a story. I haven't thought about this story in years. I forgot it happened. They trigger us, and that's what story prompts are for. So when I work with people, we do story prompts. Our membership group, we do story prompts with each other to help each other. Another tool that I love is, it's a writing technique. A lot of creative writers use it. Basically, we give you a word and we take 10 minutes. When we say go, you write that word and do pen and paper because it works much better. And you just write whatever pops in your head after you write that word. Let's say the word was, I don't know, boba tea or something crazy. And you just write that. And then whatever comes, and you're not worried about complete sentences. You're not worried about completing stories or thoughts. You're just writing. And you keep writing and you don't stop. If you think you got a blank, you just start writing numbers, flavors of ice cream, colors, whatever, until something more pops in. And as we do that, you start to uncover stories. Your brain starts going to places it hasn't gone in a long time. And subconsciously, suddenly these stories start popping in. I try to do that at least once a quarter with myself, and sometimes more. But I think my favorite method that I personally use is called following the map backwards. I was reading a book by an author, Mark Schaefer, called Cumulative Advantage. It talked about all the different moments in our lives that doors opened, maybe really wide, maybe just a little bit. But did we go through them? Did we take that option? Did we go for it? Whatever the case may be. And I started thinking about it and I said, you know what? I was about to do my first talk on stage years back. And I thought, you know what? How did I end up here? And I started going backwards. Oh, I ended up here because this happened. Well, but how did that happen? Well, because of these and this and this and this. And I just went back as far as I could. And I uncovered things I hadn't thought about, or moments that I just hadn't recognized as moments, as stories, as parts of my life where things changed, things that were shareable. And if I shared, other people would be able to relate to. And the cool part about following the map backwards, you can do it every day from wherever you are at that moment, and the path backward changes. So you're always going to be able to keep uncovering stories. So they're just a few of the things that I like to do with myself and with clients, but I also like to do them with people who leave reviews. When we get reviews, one of the things I notice, we all do this, right? We get this great review and we just reply back, thank you so much for the kind words. We're glad you enjoyed what we did and we hope to do work with you again soon, blah, 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 blah. But have you ever thought about reaching out to those people and asking them why they decided to take the time to do that? What was it about your service that they loved? Why was that so important to them? Why did that particular piece of what you did matter to them? People love to talk about themselves. And if you show a true interest in them and reach out, you're going to uncover more stories than just they did a great job. You're going to find stories that you can share in your content that people will be able to relate to versus the same old blah, blah, blah that we share all the time. But it's about catching them. It's about finding them. One of the best ways to do that is to develop the habit of listening and asking. Next time you're speaking with someone, if you want to pull stories and catch stories from them, listen with the idea of trying to figure out what to ask next. Listen so you know what to ask next, Don't listen so you know what to say next. And if you can start doing that with yourself, with others, with your customers, with your employees, with your team, with anyone, from a place of true empathy and really wanting to know about that person, they're going to share stories with you that are going to be incredible pieces of content for you to use. So we're doing all these different things, right? So we're recognizing stories, new stories, we're remembering stories, but so we don't forget them again, then we create what's called a story journal. I use a Google Sheet. It has a few different headings on it. But every day at the end of the day, I sit in bed or wherever I want to. I have it on my phone too, because sometimes I do it immediately because the ADHD kicks in and I know I'm going to forget it. But I just write down things that happen during the day, not the whole story, just a few notes so that I can go back to them later and decide if it's a story I want to craft or can use. But I collect these. So I have hundreds of stories in this arsenal that I'm building because I'm writing them down as I recognize them, as I remember them, or as I relate them with people that I'm in cohorts with, whether it's partners, business, family, whatever the case may be. And as I have them, what I start to do is line them up with another tool that I have that I share with people, where I take the different personas that I target in my business and decide which stories are more likely to connect with specific personas and which stories will give the emotional feeling or release the type of endorphin that I want them to feel, because I know when they feel that, they're more likely to do certain things. And so when I'm marketing, I'm like, you know what? I really need to focus on this particular segment of my my target audience, and I need more people who are ready to do these particular things. I want them to connect with me on this level. I go through my arsenal and I use a spreadsheet because I can sort them. Here's the stories that are more relevant to this persona, and here's the ones that are more likely to give this particular feeling with the goal of being this. And so I collect them, I collect them and collect them. And then I use them and I use them, but then some, and then I go back to them when I need them again. So the whole story catching method is about continuously being in this mode of finding stories that you'll be able to use in the content and the different marketing pieces that you put together so that you can build relationships that are more deeper and last longer. That's the whole goal behind it. You want people to feel like they belong. There was a quote in what's the book? Long Story Short is what the book was called. And the quote in it said, if you respond well to something, it's because you relate to the person or to the story. But the part that hit me the most was, if you don't respond well, it's because you don't feel included. Stories open up a portal of belonging. They make people feel included. When I can feel something from you, I can connect with you. You think about a good example, think about movie previews, right? Coming soon, theaters everywhere. If you go back and you listen to these previews, yes, they share some of the story plot, but they share it in a way that the emphasis is on the emotions they want you to feel so that you connect to the story that's going to be shown so that you want to go see it. If I just said this summer, a mailman uh, goes through a crisis, he can't get his mail delivered on time, then he meets someone and now he can. Well, there's a little bit of a plot, but they're not going to share it that way. They're going to put the emotions in the spotlight and then let the plot kind of just be this little icing on top so that there's the story. But they want you to feel, right? There's a mailman struggling with depression. He's not sure if he can go on. The despair has become too much. He's alone. Right? So they're going to share those kinds of things. So that's what we want to do with the stories. We want to find them, then we want to find the emotion and pull them out. Obviously, we don't have time for me to teach you every little thing and how to do this, but I'm going to give you one little fun little story tip. When you find these stories, and you uncover these stories, a lot of times when we tell stories, we say, well, this happened and then this happened and this happened. Oh, and then this happened. And then we did this and then we did this and then we did this and. And it becomes this travel log instead of a story. But, and I know even right now when I said but, your ears perked up because you realize, oh wait, he's about to say something different and go in a different direction. And it's the same with a story, right? When you're telling a story, you need to have those but moments where something different, something unexpected, there's this hurdle, there's this whatever it is that comes in. That's just a little storytelling tip. So make sure that you aren't afraid. I always tell people, don't be afraid to expose your butts. Okay. Because when you expose your butts, people are going to pay attention. So that's a little crafting little thing for you. Crafting is the second step in the process. And crafting a story, that there's the hero's journey. Most of you have probably heard about it, and it can get real in depth. I mean, there's books written on it that are thick enough to be booster seats. But I'm going to give you my simplified version. The hero's journey and the stories that you share with people, there's a hero with a hurdle they need to overcome to get the harvest they're looking for. Hero, hurdle, harvest. Hero, hurdle, harvest. Get that into your mind. And when you're crafting stories, try to use that process. Who's doing what? And you can be the hero. There's a lot of people out there like the customer has to be the hero. The customer doesn't always have to be the hero. There's times where that's true, but there's times where it's okay for you to be the hero if you're sharing a story that people can relate to and connect with you on an emotional level. I have a friend whose big thing is relationship marketing. And we did a story catching session. And she would always talk about people are so important. And that's why we focus on relationships, because it's relationships that sell and grow businesses. We found out that this person basically was abandoned as a teenager by their parents. Couldn't get to school. Most times couldn't eat unless other people took her where she needed to go or invited her to have a meal, sometimes for a place to sleep. Her entire survival growing up happened because of relationships. And so I said, why don't we take that story and you can be the hero? And you can be the hero of that story because people are going to relate with the hurt, with the sense of being alone. They'll start to think about friends that they've relied on in the past. And now when you tell people relationships matter to you, now I know why. And because I felt that, I want to work with you. Versus the other person who's just telling me relationships matter, relationships matter. You see the difference? There was another woman, she worked for a lawnmower company. She was in marketing. And we were doing a session and started talking. And I asked her what she liked about working there. She said, I love the customer service. I'm like, okay, well, what about it? She said, I've just never seen anything like it. If you need them, they're there. Day and night, doesn't matter where, what, they're there. Like they actually care and they're there. If you need something, they are there. I said, so it's like having a lawnmower with two seats in it, right? They're just riding along with you. She said, yes, that's kind of what it's like. I said, well, that's awesome. I like that. That's a cool picture to paint. But you're in marketing. Why is the service so important to you? And as we drilled down and had our discussion, finally got to the point where she teared up and she said, because I never had anyone like that in my life. So well, you're married. She goes, nah, no, Chad, I've never had somebody that I could just say I need and they're there. Where they make me feel like I'm important, like I matter first. And so I said, maybe we need to look at crafting that into a message because there's a big difference between our customer service is unparalleled. Nobody can match it. We're there for you 24/7, anytime you need us. And sharing a story of we know what it's like to be alone. We've had moments where we felt abandoned and like no one was there for us. And it sucks. It sucks to feel like maybe you don't matter. And when we started this company, we wanted to make sure that we never made anyone feel that way because we know what it's like. big difference in between telling me your service is great and help me realize that you understand how I feel because you felt it. That's the power of stories. That's the power of taking these stories, catching them, crafting them with the idea being the third piece of the puzzle, which is convert. So we catch, we craft, we convert. Too often we think the word convert, and so we start thinking, whoa, convert. Oh, I need them to fill out a form. I need them to buy from me. But you know what, guys? There's so many other ways that people convert. And that's why I have three things under convert. Your stories need to help people know, believe, and do. I want my stories to help people know who I am, know what I do, know how to do business with me, know the problems that I solve. If someone knows you because of stories you shared, that's a conversion. They know me. That's a conversion. I want stories that are going to help them believe that I can do and will do what I said I'll do. I want them to believe that I can help them solve the problem that they're struggling with. In my case, being able to find and uncover stories in places you didn't know they were and putting them into a story-centric marketing plan. And then I want stories that make them do something. And that would be your lead form or contact me or make a purchase or attend a seminar or whatever. But stories have the power to do that when they connect. I hope you're seeing a little bit of the difference from what a lot of other people may be sharing and talking about in their content or storytelling. The storytelling is not so much about just sharing, hey, here's what happened. It's about sharing a vulnerable side so that people feel what you feel. We talk so often about the buyer's journey when we start talking about conversions and creating content, right? Awareness, consideration, decision. And what do? We create content for people based on this one space where they are. All right, I need awareness content. Okay, I need consideration content. And we just pigeonhole this content like it's for this, and for this specific point. And we don't think about creating content in a way that it takes me on more of a narrative journey, right? It's a buyer's journey, but we focus on just the individual places instead of the actual journey they're on. I like to take the 5 major components of a story and incorporated them into the buyer's journey so that when I'm creating content, I'm thinking more about what they're feeling, where they're going, and where they've been. Those 5 things are anticipation. There's an anticipation stage in a story. It's where we find out who the hero is, what they were like, what makes them who they are before they were even aware of the fact that they had something they needed to deal with. When you start thinking about your customers that way and you start catching and finding stories that allow you to connect with them where they are before they're even aware of the fact that they need to be aware, that opens a whole new pool of people to reach and connect with. Then what happens, right? Then there's this dream stage. Everything's going right. I am aware of what I want to do. I have goals. I know what I want to do. I'm doing great. Things are going well. Do you have content that addresses those moments and shares stories about when things are going well before they started going bad and your services are needed? Then in the story, the hurdle pops up, frustration sets in. And so there's content that flows in a story and takes me through to that phase where I'm like, yeah, I've been there. That's where I'm at. I'm feeling that. And then the story keeps going and there's this climax stage. It's either where all hell breaks loose, the bottom falls out, this guide shows up, this tool reveals itself, a light starts to appear, and then there's a resolution. When you share content in the form of a story, you can take your customers along the narrative journey with you rather than just creating a piece of content to show them, hey, you should consider us. Here's all the great things we do. All the great things we do. Those all have their place. But what I want you to do is leave here remembering that every decision we make, every purchase we make, everything we do emotionally first, and then we rationalize it with facts later. So if you can connect with people and you can catch the stories that are going to resonate with them most, that's when you're going to see a greater impact. That's when you're going to see your community grow. That's when you're going to start seeing more user generated content from fans who want to continue to do business and want to make sure everyone else can as well. Because you didn't just share the stories that you caught, but you also caught theirs and showed an interest in their stories so that now you can create stories together. That's what user generated content is. It's the result of you sharing your stories, being interested in their stories to the point that they want to create something together with you. That's the ultimate goal with the whole story catching framework. Um, I was gonna let's see. Let me share this. I do have a thing, and then I'll get some questions here from you. Let me see if I can just at least share this. I have a tool I call the story. It's a story catching workbook. Um, it's just to help you kind of get into the habit of thinking about things throughout the day and finding stories. Let me share that with you real quick, though. Let's see how to do that. Share screen. Uh, see, I'll share screen and I'll do this. Maybe that there's a quick rundown of the framework. The little QR code up there at the top is it's just a link where I have this. It's about a 6-page workbook that just gives you some questions and things to ponder at the end of your day to help you reboot your brain to remember things that happened in different ways. Um, People who've used it have messaged me and said not only did it help them uh, find stories, but they actually found it very insightful and they uncovered stuff about themselves. So feel free to use that. I use it, and um, it's helped me along my story catching journey as well. Okay, so hope you got that. I can stop the share. I can also, Dennis, I can send you the link if people need a direct link to be shared out.
Sure, that'd be great.
So, all right, I know that was a lot of information. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have, or if I need to clarify some things, because I do know it's a
Oh,
lot.
oh, well, first of all, thank you, Chad. It's a really interesting framework. So one question I have, maybe more of a request, to help us connect the dots, can you tell us a story, pun intended, of how you use your framework for on a particular client case?
Well, I mean, I had the two that I just shared. Um, there was a lot of it's the stories of helping people understand that the reason you do what you do is because of the experiences that you had, right? So the relationship marketing, the lawnmower story. Um, for me, my own story involves the fact that other people listened to me and helped me find my own story, which was them telling me that I was really good at helping other people find stories and pull them out. So there's my own story. So when I share that, that's why I do this, is because I realize that I love the fact that other people listened to me and helped me realize that who I am and the stories I have made a difference in their life and in the reason that they are connected with me and do business with me. And they helped me realize that I had been good at that. And so I wanted to be able to do that for other people. There was another young man, they had an agency and they really wanted to get bigger clients, but they kept focusing in on these small businesses and they couldn't figure out why. Like every time they wanted to create stuff for bigger businesses, they struggled with just getting into it. And did a story catching session with this young man and found out his first job was at a restaurant. And he came from this life of privilege, money, family. He didn't even have to work. He was just working because his parents were like, you need to learn how to have a job or whatever. And he worked at this restaurant with all of these less fortunate people who were working multiple jobs, trying to make ends meet. And it humbled him. And he started finding himself learning about these people, the struggles that they went through and the dreams that they had. And while he didn't have the ability to do a lot for them, he realized that he'd been blessed and he had this strong desire to want to help those that didn't have the advantages he had be able to succeed. I said, well, that's interesting. It seems like that's what you've been spending your entire time with your agency doing. And perhaps maybe that's why you struggle trying to go after these bigger clients with tons of money. And it's because your heart really is helping the little guy, helping the small guy. And he said, yeah. And so we started crafting stories around that, around moments where he saw others and about businesses that were struggling, but they were able to work with them, and some of the sacrifices that they made to deliver more than they said they were going to for costs that people could afford, because of the moments in his life that he'd seen where it touched his heart and he realized that he wanted other people to have the opportunities he had. And so they started focusing on that, and they grew the business that way, and they stopped worrying about, okay, we want to be the guys with all the big clients. They started focusing on that. They started sharing that message, and the small clients wanted to come work with them because they knew, you know what, they get me. They actually care about me. So, that's another example. Um, there's just, everybody has their own things. It's just, it's funny when I do the sessions with people, a lot of times they'll tell me it feels like therapy with out advice, because I can tell you how to use the stories, but I can't solve, like, your dad issues or things like that. But so I don't know. I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, it does. Let's open
well,
up the floor. Feel free to come off mute and ask a question, or you can use the chat. Does anyone have a question?
I have a
Iris?
question.
Oh,
Oh, go ahead. I'll keep my hand up. Go ahead.
All right, thanks, Iris. Yeah, so I love the presentation, Chad. I've been to a lot of talks about, developing and writing stories, but never something about catching the story. So I like the framework that you gave. So along in that kind of phase of catching stories, I'm not always the best at kind of, real time active listening in terms of, okay, I need to remember this or jot this down in terms of, okay, this is a potential story point or full story. Are there any sort of techniques that you have to kind of get into that mindset when you're having that conversation with either it's a client or a friend or a colleague or whatever? Is there some sort of mnemonic or something that you use?
for me, I'll be honest with you. When I start to have these kind of conversations with people, because I'm at, I do the ADHD thing, right? And, take the meds, do all the stuff, right? As most of us entrepreneurs and marketers seem to all have some kind of struggle with that. But when I get into that phase, my first thought is I remind myself, my wife tells me I suck at listening. So that puts me in the mindset of, okay, I know that I have to zone in to do this. But then throughout the entire time that they're talking, I've done a really good job of learning how to just remind myself, what do I want to ask? That's for me the biggest thing. I mentioned that earlier. It's just listening to ask. If you listen because you want to know what to ask, you have to hear what they're saying, or you're going to ask something completely irrelevant and look stupid. So that's my other part, is I just don't want to look stupid. But the other part is that I do really care about the person. That's a little bit harder to teach because I'm a natural, like, empath, right? So that's why I came up with the listen to know what to ask next. Because if you do that, you can't help but start to try to feel what they're feeling. I wish I had some, like, super smart answer, but it's really just going in with the mindset of, I'm going to listen to know what to ask, not
No,
what
that's
to
great.
say.
That's great. No, thanks, Chad.
Yeah. Iris, I see a little hand thing. I can't hear you. You're muted. Oops.
So thanks, Roy. I was going to ask about listen and ask. So I'm glad you expanded on that. The other part that I wanted to find out a little bit more about was your story journal with Google Sheets. Did you say you just kind of list the things that happen throughout your day, and out of that somehow you expand? And how does that maybe relate to a potential client or a client?
You don't know all the time at first, right? So the Google Sheet that I use, it has a few headings on it, and not all of them do I fill out every time in the moment. Sometimes I just don't have time. I keep mine on the home screen of my phone, so that if something happens and I know I just really don't want to forget this, as soon as I'm done, I'll hit that and I'll put the notes, who was there, where we did it, what was going on, and a quick little synopsis. I don't craft and write the whole story out. Um, if it made me feel a certain way, I may want to write that. If there was something very powerful in it, then of course I want to make sure that the things I really don't want to forget, I don't want to forget. Um, but otherwise, for the most part, I open up my spreadsheet at the end of the day while I'm laying in bed, and I just try to think through a lot of the stuff that's on the workbook that I gave you the QR code for. That helps me at the end of the day, and then I put those thoughts into that journal, and then I go back and look at it. So, like, let's say I'm speaking somewhere next week on stage, and I say, you know what, I've used this particular story a lot. I need something else to share. I don't have to sit and go, if I remember, I go through my spreadsheet with hundreds of stories, and I just scan through them. Like, you know what? Yeah, that made me feel this way. It's going to deliver this message. Now I'm going to go craft it. I'm going to go craft it. The journal, the spreadsheet isn't about crafting. It's about helping you do a better job of recognizing and remembering. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question. But I would start with the little workbook that I gave you guys access to. Um, that'll help you at the end of the day, big time. But you've got to write them down. But I just use a Google Sheet. If any of you guys want to find me on Facebook Messenger or LinkedIn or message me, I'll send you a link to a copy of the journal spreadsheet. Happy to do that.
So there's something about the act of collection and going back and looking at your well or your what you've collected, and somehow in our brain or in our brains are somehow find connections and ways to relate. But it's the important part is having something to a resource to go to that enables you to find a story that you can use to connect with your audience, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm looking and I have a particular type, let's say I'm trying to write content for new people trying to get their first presentation for stage. That's one of the personas, right? Versus a small business owner who's trying to use stories for marketing content. I go through my arsenal and I look for stories because I also try to make a note of who I think this is going to resonate with the most. Then I can sort the spreadsheet and it'll just list all my stories by, oh, these are the ones I felt new speakers would resonate with. And that narrows it down for me. Um, so, yeah, it's everybody's going to have their own way of doing it. That's what works for me. For that, hopefully that was what you were looking for.
Yes, thank you. It's a matter of developing a habit that where you're collecting something. You don't know what it's going to happen. It's like a toolkit, right? You don't know when you'll use it, but you eventually may use it. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, that was helpful.
And don't get me wrong, I still have moments where I'm somewhere and something awesome happens, but then suddenly somebody else starts talking to me and I didn't grab my spreadsheet and I didn't write it down. I get to the end of the day. I still have moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't write that down. It was so good. It was so good. I cannot remember what it was. And I've been doing this a long time and I still have those moments. So
All right, so we have time for one more question. So Chad, I got a question messaged to me from Bennett. He asks, can you cite any good examples of great storytelling that we can look at? He says, I don't know what that would be, specific web content or collateral that we can find. I guess, like, what examples can we go look at?
I'll tell you somebody who's really good using stories from a personal branding standpoint. Two people that pop into my head is Leslie Samuel. He's a YouTuber. He markets himself as an MC, and he teaches biology to kids in crazy ways on YouTube. But he shares stories on his social media that just make you want to go look at his content almost without really knowing what his content's about. But the stories, the way he shares stories, you're just like, I want to know more about this guy. Another who is great at finding stories from other people and sharing them and getting them to be okay with maybe tearing the wall down a little bit. And he shares them in his books and in his blog posts and in his Instagram stories is Mark Schaefer. Mark Schaefer is, if you don't know or follow him, phenomenal storyteller in different ways too. Video, short form, long form, written, drawn out. He's just very, very good at telling the story in a way that you get the narrative, but it resonates, you feel it, and he makes it relevant to what it is that he's trying to get the message across. So his the way he does it makes you want to go do business with him or read his next blog.
Excellent. I just got a question about the recording. Yes, we will share the link to today's recording. Bennett, did you have anything to add to Chad's answer?
No, I mean, I don't think so. Those are individuals. I mean, are there examples of like organizations or companies?
Bigger,
That may be
bigger,
harder.
Yeah, I mean, because my target audience, the people that I work with the most, are speakers and a lot of personal brands or small businesses. Um, so Now Marketing Group is an agency. I think they do a really good job of being vulnerable and sharing stories of things that happen and mixing it in with what they do. Um, Michael Stelzner. Now, it's a personal brand, but he also is the president of Social Media Examiner and Social Media Marketing World, the event. Um, he's great at being very vulnerable and sharing stories, not just about things he's dealing with in life, but also marketing questions and struggles and being okay with not always having the answer. And the way he does that makes you want to sign up for the information that Social Media Examiner shares because their team does a great job of sharing stories within the content that they create as well. So that would be another. One of the things, it's the hardest, the struggle is learning how and getting better at crafting the stories in a way that people remember the story, but they also remember who the brand was. Right? Like there's the Super Bowl commercial. There was a car one a few years back where they had this little kid who was like Darth Vader, and he was trying to get the car to start using the Force. And the dad uses the remote control key to start the car from the kitchen, and the kid's just like, "Oh, I did it, right?" And everybody remembers that story, but nobody remembers what car it was. Except for one time, I was lecturing to this group of students in Georgia, and they had these students from Germany, marketing students, were visiting as part of an exchange thing. And this girl in the front row, I said, and you know what? Nobody remembers. Does anybody? No, nobody remembers what kind of car it was. And she goes, "It was Volkswagen." I said, okay, I get it. You guys are from Germany. Found out her boyfriend works for the company or whatever. But she's the only one who's ever been able to tell me what it was. So that's one. I don't know why that just popped in my head. But when you're talking about big brands, I can't talk about any like big brands that I work with because I don't target them.
And with that, we're out of time, unfortunately. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Chad, thanks for a great talk. We're back in 2 weeks here on Zoom, and we are meeting in 1 week in San Mateo for those of you who are local. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.